You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. Gayle King. It's troubling their downplaying chase. Gayle King's clearly after something, whereas most people who have two functioning brain cells have been able to see the fact that this whole thing about the chase was fabricated and a lot of nonsense, with people downplaying what's been going on, the NYPD saying it was merely challenging transport arrangements. The taxi driver stated that it was exaggerated with regard to the scope of what had originally been claimed, and even improbably named plastic-faced Lieutenant Omid Scobie started to row back from what was originally said. Accordingly, many people not only have a natural scepticism when it comes to anything that involves Harry's wife, but they also looked at the actual evidence of what occurred and concluded it wasn't near catastrophic, there weren't hordes of aggressive paparazzi, there were not lots of near collisions, it's overdramatic horseshit that's been generated by Harry's wife. And of course, you all know that this is done because as a narcissist, she has to generate this for the purpose of the prime aims. Many people have come out and slated them for this behaviour, branding it ridiculous, other people thinking it downright sick and twisted because it echoes the death of Diana, Harry's mother. And of course, Harry's wife, having no emotional empathy, would quite readily use his own mother's death against him, triangulating with that particular vulnerability and circumstance. Nevertheless, Harry's wife needs people to come out and support her as a consequence of this tsunami of condemnation. And this time, according to Alex Breeden and Caroline Blair in page 6, it's down to the Lieutenant Gayle King. Gayle King thinks it's troubling that people are downplaying the 2-hour paparazzi chase her pals, Prince Harry and Harry's wife, were involved in earlier this week in New York City. Now, does she state this because she's a bit of an idiot and basically can't distinguish for herself that actually it wasn't as dramatic as they made out, it wasn't near catastrophic, there were not hordes of aggressive paparazzi, there weren't lots of near collisions? Is it simply the case that she's a bit of a dumb fuck and she can't work it out? Or is it more than that? Is it the case that she actually knows that it wasn't as dramatic as has been made out, but feels a sense of loyalty towards Harry's wife for the purposes of defending them? She continued by stating, "I think it was a very unfortunate incident," the CBS journalist exclusively told Page 6 Saturday at the 148th Preakness Stakes in Baltimore. "It's troubling to me that anybody would try to downplay what that would mean to them. That's very troubling to me." Well, we get it. It's troubling to you, Gayle, and you've said it twice in the same paragraph, which demonstrates that you perhaps find it troubling. Referring to the slew of media personalities and celebrities who have spoken out against the narrative that the two were chased in the streets of Manhattan, King said it's unsettling that some are trying to minimise how Harry and Harry's wife felt in that moment. Now, pausing there, I think this is the nub of the matter in relation to Gayle King, and that she's fulfilling two roles here. The first is that as a lieutenant, although she doesn't realise that's what she is, but as a lieutenant of Harry's wife, she feels that it's incumbent upon her to defend her. She feels a sense of obligation towards her. Furthermore, she also subscribes to this nonsense of whereby people's feelings ought not to be invalidated. As Ben Shapiro memorably stated, feelings are not facts. And the fact is that the event did not occur in the way that Harry's wife has described it. She has described it as near catastrophic. It's clear that the statement was penned by her and then handed to the lapdog, the improbably named plastic-faced Lieutenant Omid Scobie, for him to then disseminate it. It all happened rather quickly and conveniently, didn't it? Scobie was primed and ready to amplify the statement, and therefore it was clearly prepared, and he was on board with the announcement and ready to amplify it, doing anything, of course, that he can to lick up to his mistress. With Gayle King, she falls into this namby-pamby views of you're not allowed to invalidate people's feelings. You're not allowed to question how somebody felt at that moment. It's not necessarily the case that people are questioning how they felt. What they're stating is the version of events that has been described by Harry's wife is not one that accords with what has actually happened. And they are just as allowed to express that view based upon the information they see as Harry's wife is allowed to say, "Oh my God, it was near catastrophic. Harry, how did we ever survive these hordes of angry, rampaging paparazzi in their relentless pursuit?" Once again, we see that there is this sort of leftist approach that occurs, namely, you're not allowed to voice your opinion to invalidate their feelings. Oh, hang on a second. So they're allowed to say what they want, but nobody else is allowed. Ah, I see. That's how it works. But the fact is, so many people have identified, and people who don't really have any skin in the game, have identified that it was not as Harry's wife described it, and therefore they're perfectly entitled to state that. She carried on by saying, "I'm just really sorry it happened, and very sorry they had to go through it," said King, who was in Baltimore preparing to give a commencement speech at her alma mater, the University of Maryland, this week. Everyone can have all of their opinions, but I always go back to, how did they feel in that moment? Well, actually, rather than sounding like a therapist, it's not about how they felt, but rather what actually happened. Because a feeling is not an accurate representation of what has occurred. I regularly explain to those that I advise that relying on feelings is making you a hostage to a particular outcome that you don't want. By following feelings, you end up with emotional thinking, and instead, asking how do they feel in that moment, whilst might be valid if you're wanting to be sympathetic to them, is not a good foundation for establishing the facts. King, 68, met Harry, 38, and Harry's wife, 41, through her best friend, Oprah Winfrey, and has been friends with the two ever since, fulfilling, as I've explained, a role as a lieutenant. But unfortunately for King, her loyal support of them has resulted in some backlash for her, demonstrating that people really do not accept the nonsense narrative that has been put forward by the gruesome twosome. According to Mir.com, in an article by Kunal Day, "Get a life!" Gayle King slammed for expressing concern over downplaying of Prince Harry and Harry's wife's car chase. Gayle King faced backlash for saying it was troubling that the public is downplaying Prince Harry and Harry's wife's alleged 2-hour paparazzi chase in New York City. Harry, 38, Harry's wife, 41, and her mother, Doria Ragland, 66, were allegedly hounded by the press on Tuesday night, May 16th. Reps said the trio was extremely upset and shaken after the incident that took place while they were travelling in Manhattan after leaving Ziegfeld Theatre, where the Suits alum was honoured at the Women of Vision Awards. The group was reportedly travelling in an SUV, yada, yada, yada. "I think it was a very unfortunate incident," the CBS journalist told Page Six on Saturday. "It's troubling to me that anybody would try to downplay what that would mean to them. That's very troubling to me." She took a shot at the numerous celebrities and media figures who pushed back against the narrative that the Duke and Duchess were chased in the streets of Manhattan, saying it's unsettling that some were trying to minimise how Harry and Harry's wife felt in that moment. However, the veteran journalist was execrated on social media for defending the couple. "It's troubling that Gayle King is enabling her Sussex children's fantasies. Harry's wife and Prince Harry are middle-aged. Time they grew up," one tweeted. "It's troubling that she does not believe their cab driver," another wrote. At Gayle King, when, pray tell, are you going to realise, by sticking up for this devious duo, you're also becoming comic relief like they are, someone else offered. "It's troubling that Gayle King is troubled over people not being troubled. Get a life, Gayle. Do some social work. and make a contribution to the homeless veterans, investigate the trafficking of children, etc. You know, real problems. Another chimed in. Thus, people don't accept what Gayle King has to say, and her attempts to try and defend Harry and Harry's wife fail. As a well-intentioned lieutenant, this is demonstrative of the problem that Harry's wife now has. Even when a loyal lieutenant steps forward trying to defend her, she's immediately shot down, and all it does is remind people of the original problem in the first place, namely that Harry's wife has invented a scenario and overreacted to it. Thus, all Gayle King does is make it worse, reminding people of the nonsense, rather than actually being an effective defender of them. She, as a loyal lieutenant, believes that she's helping, but she's not. And what it also demonstrates is the level to which Harry's wife has now plummeted, that the efforts of a lieutenant not only fall on deaf ears, but they provoke a response which issues further challenges to Harry's wife. She essentially makes the position worse. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.